Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm looking at Step Poly Arp Unit by Laurent Colson. If I'm mispronouncing your name, Laurent, I'm sorry. No idea, is this a French surname or what? So he has developed a few different apps, very well respected and highly regarded developer. QuantiChord, StepPolyArp Unit, Chord Polypad, this other one, the only one I don't have, Music Math Touch, a music calculator. Might ask him for a copy of that, sounds useful. So today I'm looking at StepPolyArp Unit, and I've got 5 copies of any app by Laurent to give away to subscribers to the channel. If you're not a subscriber yet, you can subscribe now, that's not a problem. If you want to know what you need to do to win, look at the pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comments section, and the winners will be announced 2 days after release of this video. Please read the instructions carefully, everybody, because there are a variety of apps available today, and not only do you have a chance to win one of those, you've also got a chance to win a copy of Mela 2 by Nicolosi, which I'll use a little bit later in this demo, so please do read those instructions carefully, everyone. If you are watching this video after those 2 days and you've missed the chance to win, well, you might consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future giveaways. I usually have apps to give away. Never mind the fact that I do really useful and detailed tutorials on iOS music apps. All right, so let's get started. So first, I'm just going to let you hear a little bit of this in action. I'm going to use it to play Ravenscroft. I'm going to start with an example that sounds maybe complex, but very easy to come up with and very nice sounding, I think. If you like minimalism, if you like ambient, if you like frippertronics, all that kind of thing, this is a brilliant app. But it's not only for that, you know, making any kind of music, pretty much, I'm absolutely sure you could find a use case for this. It's just an incredibly useful app. In my opinion as well, it's one of the best designed apps on iOS. It's got an incredible interface that is pretty intuitive and works on 2 completely different levels. One, if you just go in and you don't read the manual, you can basically use it and you'll find that it's quite a powerful arpeggiator, and you'll be able to get quite a lot of things without reading the manual. But if you go in and actually read the manual, you'll discover there is so much depth to this app, but it has been done in such a great way. There's a little bit of a learning curve at the start, but not too much. And once you've learned this stuff, you probably won't forget it because it's very well done. It's very memorable how things are done. So once you figure them out, you know them for life. Extremely powerful things like, for example, when we click on a note event, we get these great dialogues that open up that can do a bunch of seriously cool stuff. So let me just walk you through initially a few of the cool features, and later in the video I'll sort of be doing like more a main walkthrough and a couple of creative ideas as well about how to use this app. So let's see what is happening here. So first of all, I mean, we can see we've got the speed set here, and we got it on quite a fast speed, and we could change that if we wanted, right? And we've got a lot of different speeds. So now we've just immediately halved the speed, and we have triplets and things like that, dotted, etc. That's pretty cool. Let's just leave it like that, actually, maybe like that. We've got here this gate, right? So this is how long our notes are. So you can see there I was keeping those notes really short, getting a nice staccato kind of vibe. But it's not too harsh because I'm using my favorite reverb, FAC Alteza. Turn off the internal reverb. Okay, so we've got our gate there. We can also apply swing if we want. but I'm not going to for this. We've also got control over the octave range. And we've got a bunch of different orders. I'll demonstrate these for you with a simpler example later. You can see though at the moment it's on a random order here. This will play chords. Again, we'll look at these in more detail with a simpler example that will be better to illustrate them. We've got a couple of menus. We got, okay, this setup menu here. Look here, we've got undo and redo. We've got this cog here that also has a bunch of different things for editing the grid. We've got copy and paste. We can randomize patterns. We've got monophonic pattern or polyphonic pattern choices. A bunch of different options for filling steps. We can move things around. Now, one thing that I want to point out, if you watched my video on Atom 2, and if you haven't, you should, because it's absolutely brilliant. Atom 2 is much more powerful for moving things around, because in Atom 2 we can select individual notes, for example, or a few notes, and then we can move them while not moving other things. Also in Atom we can move left and right, but we can also move up and down. In this we can't do that. Still, this has a lot of other things that Atom doesn't have. I recommend both apps very, very strongly. Another thing I'll just mention, I'll just bypass that a second. The two will work extremely well together. So, for example, if you have something you like in this, just play it into Atom, and then in Atom you can do all the really cool Atom 2 editing stuff that you can do in that. So, best of both worlds, really. Okay, then what else we got? Right, let's get this going again. So, you can see here that we've got these different lanes that basically cover a span of 2 octaves, and these show the semitone jumps between these notes. So you can hear, if you're paying attention, that these are high notes, right? And this low one. Now these are also quantized to a scale. If we look down at the bottom, in this case they're quantized to C minor. Another thing you'll notice is that I've got it on sequence mode here. So there are 2 modes, ARP mode and sequence mode. If it's on sequence mode, you've got to have your host transport running, and you don't need to input notes. It will mark this as a C, and these will be relative to that. By the way, we can change this. If we don't want it to be C, we can change it to something else. If it's in ARP mode, we'll need to feed notes into it, and the transport will not need to be running. So we can adjust the length of these lanes, and that's allowing us to get this really cool polyrhythmic pattern going. We draw in notes by just tapping. We can make notes longer by dragging them. Make them shorter by dragging them back. We can delete notes by double tapping. Or another way to delete notes is by clicking on it and just doing a throwing motion. You just click and throw. Really cool. Now, it's got a lot of hidden menus. For example, if I tap on a note event, this menu opens up that will give a lot of control over the way that that note is played. We'll look at these in a bit more detail later. You can also vary the chance that it will play. And what's really cool is you can see that's actually reflected in the fading of the color. Beautiful feature. And we can also do ratcheting. Let me just put the the chance up to 100 again for a second. So here I can choose how many steps I divide it into. Now notice you see that this note it covers what, 4 steps, right? So now here we've got it divided into 8. There's going to be 12. It's going to be divided into 16. And we can use this acceleration to change. It's actually making this one a little bit longer, and then it gets a bit shorter. So cool. Or here it's going from shorter to longer. This makes it more organic. Another thing we can do to make the ratchets more organic is use the velocity curve. So here it's going from quiet to loud. Here it's going from loud to quiet. Just beautiful, beautiful. Unbelievably fantastic implementation of ratcheting. Can definitely think of some other developers who could take a leaf out of this book for handling ratcheting in their apps. So ratcheting can get a bit in your face, right? So it's really nice to reduce the chance of playing, so you won't get them happening all the time. And I've already got another ratchet going in this one, right? So what I'm going to do actually is just delete that one. It's a bit too much. So let's say we think it's a bit too busy. I mean, one thing we can do obviously is change the speed. Oh, that's nice. Or of course, another thing we can do is lengthen the lanes. If we lengthen the lanes and don't put more notes into them, then there's going to be more space in our composition. Just incredible. So I'll pop out for a second and I'm going to check something. I'll come back and we'll continue. So let's set up a more simple example to demo these. So I'm opening up a StepPolyArp in a MIDI channel. I'm going to use it in Arpeggiator mode. I'm going to feed in from the AUM keyboard here. Okay, I want to feed it into this. I'm going to bypass this one. I only want stuff coming in from this. Here, okay, let me see. I'm going to clear this blank. What else do I want to do? I'm going to make it a 2-bar loop. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this link button here. When I have pressed this link, when I drag back from here, all of them are going to move. What happens if I don't press link, if I depress it or unpress it or whatever, then if I drag here, for example, it's going to shorten this lane, but it's not going to shorten the others. And that is how we make polyrhythmic lanes, okay? But for now, I'm going to link it. So we'll do, let's say 2 bars, okay? Now, let's put it on Arpeggiator mode, okay, and that's sequencer. And let me play, let me just, I'll just latch that on the AUM. Okay, I played that. Now let's draw in some notes here. What I'll do is I'll throw that away for a second. I think Ravenscroft has quit. Let me change the preset. Okay. So what I'll do here is I'll just choose fill all steps. Okay, now this is a bit in your face. So very important thing. If we drag this down a little bit and open it up, and we get here then these velocity controls. So we'll just bring the velocity down a little bit. And I'll just kind of randomize it a little bit. Let's hear what that's like now. Nice, but let's bring it down really low because we don't need this loud. Just as long as it's loud enough for you to hear it. So you can see here, right? We're playing a C, an E, and a G. And we've got this upwards pattern. It's just going C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G, right? Now here it's going to go down. G, E, C, G, E, C. Okay, here it's going to go up and down. Da, 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 da. Okay, here you can already guess what it's going to do. It's going to go up, but it's going to repeat the top note twice. Da, 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 da. Okay, here it's going to go down and up. Here it's going to go down and up, repeating the bottom note. Here it's going to do randomize. And here it's playing it as a chord, right? Now, let's put it on random. Now, so in the Audiobus forum today, or yesterday, maybe can't even remember now, I asked people, do you have any power user tips for StepPolyArp that you'd like to share? So a guy called Crafty Curate, thank you Crafty Curate, had a good tip about using the random in an interesting way. So we can look at that, for example, when we do these note events. So when we click here, we have a chance to set what the note will do. So if it's set like this, it's basically just going to go along and play the next thing. So if it's random, that's not going to mean much. But for example, if it's set like this, if all of these are just forward arrows like this, then their behavior is going to be predictable. They're just going to do exactly this kind of thing we heard. Right? Or but what happens is when we start to change these arrows, we'll start to get different behavior. So what it's going to be is like this. So this one, it's just going to do the predictable thing in terms of what we set up here. If we set this one, what it's going to do is play the same note as the last one that was played. So let's say, for example, let me put that back to this. Close. Okay, so here, this is going to play a C, for example. If this plays a C, now what note it will play, of course, depends on how many notes we're playing in here and how long the sequence is, okay? So that may or may not be a C, but it's still always going to be, you know, if we keep all these forward arrow, the basic sequence of C, E, G is going to remain. But if I change this to an equals, then what that's going to do is this note is going to play the same as that note. I'm not going to sample these now. I'll do that in a minute. If we do this one here, this will turn it back. This one will reset to the start of the pattern. So let's say you've got C, E, G. This one will make it play a C, even if that's not in the sequence that's here. This is a bit hard to explain. You'll get it when I show you in a minute. This will play whatever's at the end of the pattern. And here, this will play the first note in the pattern. This will play the second note, the third note, and so on and so on. So let's just see how we can vary these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select random. And here I'm going to, and this is Crafty Curate's very cool tip. So if I choose 1 here, then we're going to get a C, or E, or at least it's going to be following the pattern. And then let's say here, if we choose this is just going to play a random note there. Okay, let's see what we can do here. Let's just do another 1 there. Gotta press close. I wish I could tap somewhere else to get out of that. I don't really like having to press close. Do a 2 here. Let's do this one random. Let's do this one, let's say equals. And then let's do the next one as, let's say, back. And now let's see what it plays. So let's slow it down so we can hear more clearly what's going on. So pay attention to these notes and see how they'll be different each time. So here it played a 3 for this one that time. Let's see what it does next time. You see it repeated the 2 this time. So these ones are random, these ones are predictable. This one repeated, right? This will always repeat whatever's played here. Very cool. Right, so you can really do a lot of experimental patterns with these kind of things. Now think how complicated that can get if we're using polyphonic. And we're going to change the values of these things. And imagine how complicated it can get if we actually start changing the size of these. So let's unlock. Right, so we've got this whole beautiful complex thing now, all from just these 3 notes. And then we can go in, we can increase the octave range. So gate, you see, it's nice to have control of the gate, because if you're playing a slow sequence, you'll probably want this nice long gate. But if you go really fast with a really long gate, it might sound very messy. And then you might want this shorter gate. Let's put this down a bit so we can hear the swing more. It's a bit too slow. Nice. Let's hear what that's like on Mela. We'll have to send it in. I'm not used to this new preset menu. Beautiful. Just 3 notes. And we can go in and change our scales. Let's add a few more notes. I can't remember if I said this already in this video, but I did a video on Mela 1 before. The synth engine is the same. There's mainly been changes in the interface, and for example, this is now compatible with iPhone when it was only iPad before, and a bunch of changes to the UI, but if you want to understand how to use this synth, you can watch my Mela 1 video. I never know the right pronunciation of this. Is it Mela or Mela or what? So, if you enjoy experimenting and a bit of trial and error, it's really amazing what you can come up with in this app with just so little. And there are a bunch of really cool tips and tricks. I'll look at some things later in the video, try and give you a few ideas about different ways that you can use this. So I've opened up here a synth called Shaper, which I hope I will do a review on maybe a month or two from now when it gets some features added. This is a very nice synth, but it doesn't actually have link at the moment, so it's very inconvenient when you switch between presets. The BPM will not change. It will affect things like delay times and things like that. So really nice developer, very cool guy, and this is a really cool synth, but I'm going to wait to review this until it's had a few things added, and once it has had those added, I will review this synth. I do like it. So it's sounding really nice with this. This got some really nice quality sounds in it. Sorry, what am I doing there? Let me press play, transport. So just want to look here to just clarify something about the behavior of the ARP and sequencer mode. So if I switch to ARP, you can see that the transport has completely disappeared here. If I change to sequencer, then now basically here it's going to be playing Cs. And it's just going to play one note, right? It's in monophonic mode. But let's say I add something in. So here this is going up 2 semitones, and this is up 5 semitones from this base point. But again, it will be quantized to a scale. Now we can change these things, by the way, by dragging on them. For example, if I click up, I can change this to a 6 or whatever I like. Again, it's all going to be quantized. Now, if I then play in notes, right, it's going to start changing what it's doing. So you see now this is the new base point. So let's just make it a bit lower. Let's change it to a D, for example. So I may, in that case, want to click on the scale, and I may want to choose D here if I want to make D my root. But it can sometimes be interesting to just set a scale and a key and just play in whatever and see what happens. I don't think too much about these kind of things a lot of the time with these. And again, it's going to quantize, so don't worry about knowing the notes and the scale, just start playing whatever in. Keep it on 16th, I think. So if we click here, we get this line edit dialog that opens up. So here we have a bunch of things that we can do. Now, for example, if you change it to absolute, you're going to be setting an actual fixed note. It's not going to be relative. And this can be useful if you want to do drum programming. Thanks to Samu, from the AudioBus forum, for pointing out that this can be useful for using with drums as well, right, by using the absolute mode. But for now, let's keep it on relative. So again, you're going to be able to set these up for whatever your drum machine, whatever note input it is based on. You can just, very easily tweak these by dragging them. Like if we click this is going to start changing, right? So you can look at whatever your drum machine wants and change it to that. We can randomize the line. We can fill all steps in the line. We can fill every other step, every 4 steps. We can make it blank again. We can choose the MIDI channel. So look at that. So basically, you could send out every line here. You could send out MIDI to a different synth or something if you wanted to. Crazy. You can also copy and cut and paste lines. So let's again make this shorter. So I'm going to click on link. going to come back here and show you one possible pretty cool workflow. Let's just keep with 2 bars for now. So one thing that can be nice is just, first of all, let's put this on random. So let's say maybe you copy this line. So let's copy it, close, and then let's come in here, and then we can paste that in, for example. And then what we can do is we can move it, for example, right? You know, when you've already there got an idea for something, and then you can just go in and experiment. And again, you can go in and do what we looked at earlier, changing the types of events that we'll get here, as well as changing the chance to play, and so on and so on and so on. So very, very easy to dial things in, very easy to come up with random patterns. And once again, the very important thing to remember, unlink if you want to get polyrhythms. And once you start doing that, you're going to get something a lot more complicated and interesting. Don't forget about drawing in different note sizes. Maybe throwing in the odd ratchet. Nice. So do you see here what we've done here? This is the control down here for the velocity. You see what that's done? That's putting in a maximum value every 4 steps. Here it's putting a maximum value for velocity every 2 steps. It's alternating them. So, you know, all these kind of changes we can also apply to things like the velocity, the modulation, the pan. Crazy. Now, this section here we can turn on and off with this on and off button. So modulation you can use to send CC messages. So in theory, because StepPolyArp, you can set it up to take pattern changes, which we'll look at in a minute, on CC21. And you could, in theory, use one instance to send those pattern change messages to another instance. The details are in the manual. I'm not going to go into it here. I tried this earlier and I found it quite fiddly because, as you can see here, you don't really have very fine control. I mean, this is a value range from 0 to 127, but you know, that's really hard to dial in with any accuracy. So I'm not sure personally that I would be much of a fan of doing that, but it is there if you want to try it. We got volume, we got aftertouch, we got pitch bend. But another thing that we have is when we see this modulation thing here, we can click this, and now this will control exactly what kind of modulation is getting sent out. So we can control exactly the CCs. And what's also nice is that he hasn't just given us the numbers, assuming that people will know what they do. I mean, some of us may be familiar that CC1 is for mod wheel, but a lot of people are not going to really know all of the CCs by heart. So it's nice that you can see exactly what each number is sending out. So you can use this, for example, to send out to filters and things like that. Let's take a look at how we can do that. So here I'm back using Maila again. And what I want to do is use StepPolyArp to modulate the filter in Mela. So the first thing that I've done here is in this modulation section, I've drawn a modulation curve. Now these, by the way, can also be, we can change how long these are. Right, and again the lock thing will apply. Now here where we can see that I've chosen 1, so mod wheel to go out. So this is going to send out this curve on channel 1, CC1. So what I need to do then in Mela is I click Mela, and here in AUM we'll do it like this. I click on this button here, excuse me, and then here I click on this and I make sure that I have selected the instance of StepPolyArp that I want to use to send out the MIDI CC data. In this case I'm using the third instance. So you can see I've already selected that. Now another thing that I do is I go into the filter, and by the way you can see here I love the way the developer of Mela has done a really nice exposed parameters, all very nicely grouped, everything very, very easy to find. You know, you want to control something in the phaser, you know exactly where to look. You want something in the flanger, you know exactly where to look. It's great. So filter 1, we click here, and you can see that I've already set this up, that this is going to receive filter frequency change messages on channel 1, CC1. So let me press play now. So what we're getting now is this sending out. And if we look here, we can see this filter is being modulated. So that's StepPolyArp doing that modulation. So obviously, I mean, there's a serious world of possibilities there. World of possibilities. Another very cool thing, by the way, really cool thing, kind of thing that you would only know if you have read the manual, because I don't think this would be intuitive for most people. Now, I can't show you this with my mouse, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one finger here, okay? And I'm going to put my other finger over here from the other hand, right? And see what happens. You see how it's just immediately drawn a line? Basically, if I put my two fingers anywhere, it'll draw a line between those points. Super cool. So really quick way to draw a basic diagonal line, for example, or a very quick way to draw a straight line. And then we can just drag out from it. But again, you know, a little bit hard to do things with accuracy because this is not really big enough. And I think if we drag here, you know, it never becomes very big. Well, maybe if I close the pattern one, actually, let's see. I can't close the pattern, it's just opening automatically. Yeah, so this is one criticism that I would have. It's great that it can send out these values 0 to 127 for all these different CCs, and it is really nicely done, except that we just don't really have the level of control here, and it's complete guesswork to see what the value is. I mean, you can't see what the value is. Like, I don't know what is that. Is that, you know, is that about a 30? Is it 32? You know, for some things, it's important to have accuracy. Mostly it won't be. Mostly it won't be. Like when you're just feeding something into a filter or something, all you want is a rough line. It's no big deal. But for certain things, it can be important to have accuracy. So that's just one small criticism. So then what else can we look at? So patterns. So let's look at patterns. So by the way, this MIDI curve app is another nice app to use along with this. We can use this to randomize the velocity output a little bit. I just like to add a little bit of that to humanize it so it will not be just the same thing every time. Works really well. This Midi Tools app is quite useful. This is the same developer as Atom 2, if you remember. I mentioned this in my recent video. I mean, here you're getting crazy randomization, you probably wouldn't want that. But just a little bit like this, very, very useful. Okay, so anyway, let's look at patterns. So remember, by the way, everybody, yeah, please, if you're enjoying this video, if you haven't given it a thumbs up and stuff yet, please do. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So remember that the window will resize, right? So here we're seeing the mod section, make it a bit bigger. Then now we're also seeing this patterns section. So at the moment it's on pattern 4. Now if I add a new pattern, it will automatically just duplicate whatever pattern we were last on. So you can see they're exactly the same. But what I could do now, for example, is go in and just change this. Often just halving or doubling is good for musical use. Now, if I press once on a pattern, it will only change when it reaches the end. You can see it flashes while it's waiting. Now it has changed to number 4. Press now, it's flashing. Now it changes to number 5. If I double tap, it will switch immediately. So double tap for immediate switch, single tap for a switch at the end of the pattern. Watch the playhead. Okay, now if you again, let me change to number 3 maybe. I'll change to number 4. Okay, so if we again tap here one time on the pattern that is already selected, we get a dialog box coming up. So we can choose retrig position when launching. So what that will mean is when we switch from another pattern to number 4. Okay, so now it's on number 5. If I switch back to number 4, watch the playhead. You see how the playhead went back to the beginning immediately? So that's what that retrig position when launching will do. Now we can also press save the scale inside the pattern. And if we have a lot of patterns, if we want to use this, we need to select this for all of them. So I won't bother doing this, but I'll just tell you how it works. If I select this for all of these patterns, I can then go and save different patterns inside, different scales inside different patterns, and it will remember what scale they are. So you can use that to do real-time scale changes. So you can have a song, you can put it together, and you can get it to remember that it's going to make a change in this scale at certain points when it changes pattern. So that can be really useful. Again, I won't demonstrate it. This video is already getting quite long as it is, so I'd like to skip over a few things, don't demonstrate everything. Next thing, chain next pattern after playing. This is also very useful. What we can do here is we can set up a song. So basically, let's say here I choose this, and then let's say just choose 2 times. What it will do here is it will play this pattern 2 times, and then it will move to the next pattern. Unless this padlock is on. If the padlock's on, it won't do that. So you can see now it's going to switch. So remember that when this padlock is activated, it's going to be locked to that, and you've got to press it again to unlock it. So you long press to lock. Okay, what else? This latch mode. So what latch mode will do is pretty simple. Just going to pause this for a second. So latch mode will work like this. If I press a key, it will automatically be latched even if I haven't turned on the hold mode here. And then when I press another key, it will switch and it will latch on that key instead. And then if I want to unlatch, I just press on the last key again, and then everything will go silent. Now again, I won't demo all of these things because it's just too much detail. You can experiment with these. They're very easy to use and it won't take you long to figure out. So now let's go on and look at a couple of creative examples of using this app. So let's take a little look at this session here. I'll let you just hear a little bit first and then I'll explain what I'm doing with things like MidiGATEs, for example, or Rozeta Scaler in here, which are really useful tools to combine with something like this. You can see I've also thrown a Gauss in here and I'll show you that in a minute. Now currently that Gauss is not playing, so what you're going to hear is just coming from StepPolyArp. So obviously one thing, you know, you can send out the same instance of StepPolyArp to a couple of different instruments, but you may not want everything to be exactly the same. So what you might notice is this add station, although it's playing the same basic pattern as this, there are some differences. Now another cool thing, look at this, this Gauss is here, but what I've got is just the monitor is on, but Gauss is paused, right? So what does that mean? That means that basically Gauss is just passing this signal through. Let's see what's going to happen now when I press play. So I really like this. So let me just get the Gauss. So first let me turn off the triggers. Let me bring it down. So what I did was I pitched the original signal up, if I remember rightly. Using Rozeta Scaler, I pitched everything up. Now here this one is pitched down, but I pitched it up. And, oh no, sorry, no, I didn't actually. I just recorded it at normal speed, and then after, I pitched it up. And I've turned on sync here so that Gauss will resync every 4 bars. And then you can play around with triggers and stuff as well if you want. So I like that, just to from time to time bring in something a bit more interesting, like a doubling up of the tempo. And of course it also has that special Gauss sound. Now, let's look at the routing here. So this instance of Shaper is getting MIDI from MidiGATEs in MIDI channel 1, instance 2, so that's this one. MidiGATEs is getting its MIDI from StepPolyArp, okay? So what am I using MidiGATEs for here? I'm basically just using it to thin out the pattern, so only 90% of the MIDI notes from StepPolyArp will actually be played. So I really love this tool. So this is the same developer as Midi Dreams. Art Kearns, one of my favorite MIDI developers. So go and check out the Midi Dreams video I did recently if you haven't seen that yet. Midi Dreams and Midi Drums. 2 apps for the price of 1. So I can radically thin that out if I want. And MidiGATEs has a lot of different types of note filtering options. So that's a really nice, what I love doing with MidiGATEs is instead of fading in, for example, from a fader, just use MidiGATEs as a kind of fader that will start off with a very thin pattern with very few notes. And then over time, just allowing it to build into something a little bit more busy. It's just a very, very low stress way to do that. I mean, of course, you could do that in StepPolyArp yourself by adding in notes. But this way you can already have a nice pattern made in advance that you know works and just build it up gradually. When you're adding in notes in a live performance situation, for example, there's a lot more that can go wrong. So I love using MidiGATEs with these kind of MIDI tools. Now, let's see this add station. So it's getting from Rozeta Scaler over here. And you can see I've pitched it down, right, because I want this to play a bass line. Rozeta Scaler is getting its MIDI from this 5th app here. It's the second instance of MidiGATEs. And you can see I've turned down the probability much lower here. I don't want many notes. Now if we look here, what's this set on demixolydian? And the scaler I've also set to demixolydian. So I can also just live transpose using this input transpose. It means that the output will always be quantized to the scale, but I can just vary things up a little bit. And it's always going to stay in scale. So Rozeta Scaler is another one of my absolute favorite MIDI tools. And of course this is part of the Rozeta Suite pack. And I have done 2 videos on the Rozeta Suite apps by Bram Boss, same developer as Gauss, one of my favorite developers. One of everybody's favorite developers. Okay, so that's just a little example of incorporating some other MIDI apps into your workflow with StepPolyArp. MidiGATEs to filter out the probability of notes, Scaler to do real-time transposition that will quantize to scale, allowing you to vary things up. Extremely useful. But do remember also that StepPolyArp, you can play with the octaves function too. Let's just hear that in. Right, so don't forget that it has its own inbuilt thing for doing these. All different tools give you different workflows. So that's one idea. And then obviously, as I said earlier, you could record this into Atom 2. You could record your MIDI into Atom 2, do a lot of things in Atom 2 with it. You can use Gauss. You could very easily record in different patterns into Gauss, play around with different speeds, lots of different triggers and so on. I mean, all kinds of amazing looping possibilities, whether you're doing audio loops or MIDI loops or whatever. Okay, let's look at something else. Just another brief thing to mention. In Atom 2, you can copy and paste between different instances. That's a very, very useful function. In StepPolyArp, you can't do that, but of course, what is your workaround? Sorry, wrong button. You just press the presets button in AUM, save your preset to there, and then open up another instance and load that preset, and the preset will save everything. It'll save all the patterns and so on. So this is a very simple way to copy and paste, so to speak, between apps. If you don't want to keep the preset long term, just delete it after you've shared. So next tip is to remember that you can very easily just randomize something. Let's get a few more notes in it. Okay, we can randomize something, and then by clicking here on the lanes, we can set what MIDI channel they send out on. So I've already done that with one here, and you can see that what I've done is here I just put this is sending out on MIDI channel 1. This next one is sending on 2. This is sending on 3. Okay, and this is again 1, 2, 3. I just did it in a simple way. I didn't think too much about it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, and so then here in AUM, I've got 2 Lagrange and 1 Swam trumpet. I haven't reviewed these, but I did review all of the Swam sounds. Now those are MPE, so they're incredibly expressive. Here I'm just using it in a very simple way. And yeah, you can see that I'm sending the StepPolyArp into all 3 of these. But what I have done is I've changed the channels. So this one is only receiving on channel 1. The second instance is only receiving on channel 2. And as you can guess, maybe I've set this one up to only receive on channel 3. And then what we get is just, you know, something like this, and then we can play around with things. For example, we could swap the pitches. Shift things around and so on. So here with just one instance, we're playing 3 different instruments. Very simple, very easy to set up, and can be quite effective. This last thing is pretty obvious, but it's worth mentioning. So remember, just use a couple of instances and maybe change the speeds and the octave settings. For example, here, I just randomized an instance in C major, and I put quarter dotted. And then in this second instance, I did 32nd dotted. And I've also allowed this to roam up as far as the 3rd octave up here. You get a 3 octaves range. Here, only a 1 octave range. You can also see when I randomized this one, I took out some of the lower notes. I just wanted to preserve more of the higher stuff. And then we just get something. We've got this slower pattern. And then we can bring in this much faster little pattern. And of course then you can do all kinds of, you know, live manipulation, adding things in, changing your notes here. I mean, this is one thing also, everyone, really important to mention. I've been mostly showing extremely simple examples with, you know, a held chord. But remember, I mean, you could be playing full-on chords into these things. You could also use an app like, for example, Laurent himself's chord polypad. And you could be feeding chord polypad into these instances of StepPolyArp. And you could just be playing chords from an app like this. So, you know, I mean, just tons of possibilities. This video has already gone on over an hour, so I think that's enough. So what can I say in summary? I mean, just brilliant. So much stuff. Loads and loads of different speeds. Great control over gate and swing. Nice control over octaves. Tons of different shapes, including the ability to play chords. A lot of different menus that you can dive into. Don't forget, by the way, this setup menu, we've got a general MIDI channels menu, and then we've also got some more complex settings here. We've got, remember, we can tap here. We can get access to all these menus. We can swipe up and down to change these transposition values. Here, tons of different choices, copy and paste, monophonic, polyphonic, and lots of different ways to fill steps and move notes around, either on the vertical or horizontal axis. Then here, a great note entry, very, very easy to enter notes, it responds very, very well, the interface. When you draw in a new note, when you drag it, when you shorten it, it all just works very quickly and effortlessly. I've used other apps where these kind of implementations are not as well done and they're fiddly to work with. And this one is just beautiful. It always does exactly what you want it to do. Again, I love the swiping to get rid of notes. Really cool little feature. Then, of course, we've got our whole section down here, right, for changing velocity, able to draw in patterns very easily. Got our modulation thing with a menu here, detailed control over all the CCs that we send things out on, as well as a few other things that we can change here that I didn't go into, which you can read about in the manual. Again, draw in our panning, our volume, and so on. And it's so easy to draw in these things. Really enjoyable. Like I said, the only thing I would complain about here is that we don't see the actual value between 0 and 127 that is being sent out. That is something I just got an email back from Laurent just now there when I was switching between the sessions, and he said he's added that to his list for things to do. So he is still open to the idea of developing this app, even though it's been out for a couple of years. So that's great. Again, our patterns mode with a very easy ability to add patterns, ways to chain patterns together so you can make a song. And, okay, I'm glad I came to this. Actually, earlier in the video, I showed that the save the scale inside the pattern didn't seem to be working. Well, it actually does. I also just had some discussion with Laurent about that. What I found I was doing wrong was that I was pressing this and then changing the scale. That will not save it. What you need to do is, let's say in pattern 1, I want to save it as a C major, let's say, okay? I click this, and then here I just select, let me just click out to something else just in case. I select a C major, and then here I add a new pattern, okay? And again here, let me just turn this off a second. Let me just change this to C minor. C minor. Okay, I'll click here again. Save the scale inside the pattern. Now, hopefully, yes, good. So when I double click here now, you see it's changed to C major, and here it has changed to C minor. So just to repeat, the important thing is do this after you've changed the scale, not before. Okay, so we can switch between scales in a song. You can change, for example, from a minor scale to a major scale and so on. Really great. A lot of control over how we change the patterns, as well as the ability to do the clicking that we talked about earlier in the video to temporarily lock a pattern to stop it moving on to the next set in the pattern. Brilliant feature. We've got the choice of ARP mode and sequencer mode. We've got this nice latch function that we looked at. Really important one, the ability to either change all the lengths at one time or by unlocking this to get individual control and set up our polyrhythms. Not to mention the amazing event editing features, massive control over ordering, as we looked at earlier. Crafty Curate's nice tip for how to randomize a pattern but keep certain ones stable within it by using these numbered buttons. And I won't explain that again. Go back and watch that if you missed out on it. Also, the probability for each note event, amazing. Great control over ratcheting, including the ability to alter the length weighting of the ratcheting, longer at the start getting shorter, or shorter at the start getting longer. And then our velocity curves for ratcheting if we want, going from quieter to louder or louder to quieter. So just really, what a brilliant tool. Also, the absolute mode, if you want to use this as a drum sequencer, being able to send each lane out on a separate MIDI channel. I mean, it's just incredible. And what a brilliant interface. Deceptively simple looking, and most importantly, it just works well. Works well, works great with a mouse, also works great with your finger, everything, whatever way you prefer. I actually find, recently everybody, I mean, I use my mouse because I do videos, but you know what? I also actually find that it seems much more comfortable for me if I'm sitting and I basically just put my mouse down at the level of the seat. Like, let's say I'm sitting on the sofa and I put the mouse down. It's just down by my side. It's actually much, much more comfortable for me than playing around with holding my hand in the air poised above the iPad screen. So if you have any tendency to get neck or shoulder pain or anything while using your iPad, you might want to try going back to using a mouse for a while. And what you really might want to do is maybe switch up between the two of them. Can also work well. Another thing, lots and lots of scales, brilliant, but no custom scales ability, which is highly disappointing. Anyway, I think Laurent again said he'll maybe be open to adding that. At the moment, though, the scales are just hardwired into the app. You can't import Scala files or anything like that. But I think a developer with his eye for detail, someone who clearly cares about quality and is an excellent programmer, clearly, should not have much difficulty adding custom scales and so on. So, great app, fully recommend it, tons of fun, just fantastic, fantastic. I'm so glad, you know, this is one of the good things for me about this channel. Yeah, it is a lot of work at times, and sometimes I feel it's too much work and a bit overwhelming. Other times I just love it to bits, you know. But one thing is, it's great because it forces me to learn these apps. You know, before I started this channel, when I first got into iOS music, I was having the problem that a lot of us have of just getting too many apps and not learning any of them properly. Everybody, you know, even though I'm basically the music app equivalent of a drug dealer, I would encourage you, you know, don't just buy the apps left, right, and center. Get a bit more critical. Use videos like mine to really help you decide what is actually worth buying and what's not. Obviously, I'm not saying don't support developers, but you know, if you just buy too many apps, you're never going to learn anything properly. So limit, you know, spend your time on the truly great apps. There's such a fetish in the iOS music scene for new apps. When there's a new app comes out, it's like everybody's just crazy about it and they forget all the old stuff. But you know, things like StepPolyArp, these are apps that will really, really seriously stand the test of time. I strongly predict that 5 years now, people are still going to be using this. It's going to be one of those classic apps like Sampler or something. All right, rant over everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and have a good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever time zone you're in. See you in the next vid. Cheers, folks.